Hey everyone, I'm Todd Sepulveda, the editor of Prepper Website and the host of the Prepper Website podcast. And I love to be able to come to you on Facebook Live once a week. And I do my favorite article of the week. So this Facebook Live is usually my favorite article that I read on the podcast the previous week. Now we're kind of taking a break until the first of the year. So this is I still have a week, last week's podcast to choose from, and this one, it was a really favorite one of mine. I think it was pretty popular out there as well. I'm going to go ahead and let me go ahead and switch to my other view so that you can see it as well. So this was on episode 216 of the podcast, and on that episode, I read What I Wish I Knew and then Gun Cleaning Basics. And so the one that's my favorite article that I want to do today on Facebook Live is What I Wish I Knew. And it comes from Survival Sullivan. The author was a girl named Megan Stewart. And I don't believe she has a website or anything like that. I'm just scrolling down to her bio down here. Megan Stewart, so she doesn't have a website, at least that I know of. But I would be, curious if she did. This was a great article. I think a lot of people enjoyed it. There was a lot of truth in this. And so that's why I chose this one for my favorite article of the week. So again, it comes to us from survivalsullivan.com. They have a lot of great stuff over there. And so I'm not going to, when I do the favorite article of the week, I don't necessarily read it like I do on the podcast. I just kind of bounce off of the article and go from there. And so there's 25 things here. I don't know if I'm going to hit every one of them. I don't know if I'll hit all 25, but I do want to talk a little bit about some of this stuff. So let's go ahead and get started, right? The first one is, Megan says, the first one is that prepping is an industry. And I'm going to have to agree with her big time on this one. Prepping is an industry. It is a niche that is very popular out there. And people will come, whenever there's a popular niche, people are going to come by the droves to try to make money. Now, what I want to say as well is there are every niche, every segment of society out there, business out there, that people, if they can target it for whatever reason and make money, and I keep forgetting, I'm gonna switch back and forth. If they can target it and make money, they are going to do that, and that's what they've done with preparedness, right? And so there are websites out there, there are businesses out there that have come into the preparedness community solely for the fact to make money. Now there's one, I'm not going to name names, it just drives me nuts. But they even did a whole big paper on it and put it out there. The people that were not familiar with the preparedness community, and they came in, and maybe you will remember them. They started out giving away those dumb little cards, plastic cards, credit cards that turned into a knife, and all you do is pay shipping and handling, and they got your email, and then they marketed it very, very hard to you, and they are $1 million industry, $1 million business, and they will say themselves that they targeted the preparedness community because it was one that was ripe for for business or whatever. And I hate that. And I get a lot of people asking me to advertise on Prepper Website, and I turn a lot of people down just because I don't like the things that they're selling, or the way that even if their website is kind of I'm not sure about it. I don't try to even go there or link there. And sometimes there's been people who are legit, maybe people that are even watching this right now, where they're legit in stuff, and just something kind of maybe set it off, or maybe I'm a little gun shy or whatever. But I didn't respond to them, or through email, or I didn't link to their stuff or whatever because there was something about their website or whatever that gave me a little bit of a pause. But that is something that you need to consider out there. And so what I would do, and a lot of us in the preparedness community have written articles on this and different things like that, is, go to those websites. There's a lot of people who are like, they want to do the, hey, I don't want, I'm writing, I have a ghost name and stuff like that. And I can kind of understand that. But if you want to be known as someone who is providing information out there and it wants to be trustworthy and credible, you are going to put your face out there. You're going to put your name out there. People are going to know who you are. And so I decided a long time ago with Prepper Website is that there's no way, if I'm going to be online, that people were going to see me, they were going to know me, who I am. I was going to put my name out there, and that's the way it was going to be. And so I really recommend, so when you start going to different websites and things like that, look at their about section. Do they have information about who they really are, or is it just so generic? Just recently, someone sent me an email like, "Hey Todd, you linked to this one website here, and the person, this picture, and I guess I didn't. I don't know. I didn't do enough checking on it. But like, hey, this is like a stock image." And I started doing a little bit of research, and sure enough, it was. And guess what? I don't link to that website anymore because it's just I don't feel right about doing that. So I want to put that out there. There are people out there that are very, very legit. People out there that are really doing a great job. People who care about putting a good article out there, a good podcast, a good video out there, and you should support those people. One of the things is that eventually, if people are putting out so much that if there's not any kind of sometimes just an email. When I get an email from someone that listened to the podcast, or just from someone on the email list, like, "Hey Todd, we appreciate what you're doing," man, that just sends. That just gives me a big boost to be able to continue doing what I'm doing. And I don't make a lot of money off the website. I definitely do not. It's not my full-time job or anything like that. It's like a second job almost with all the different things that I do. But if you're out there and you're looking at the different websites and stuff, and you are supporting the different businesses, make sure that they're legit. Do just a little bit of research. I know that might be hard to do sometimes, but Megan was definitely right when she said this about the preparedness, prepping as an industry. All right, so she goes on and she says it's not all about the gear, and I will agree with her on that. It's not always about the gear, but the gear does make a difference. I mean, the gear does help out. So that's one reason why you'll hear a lot of people on in preparedness talk about you have to know skill. You have to know skill. You need to be able to not only use have the gear, but use the gear, know what the gear is all about. But besides that, how can you get by without? Is it something that you can get by without if you didn't have gear with you? And so gear makes things a lot easier. For instance, if you go out into the wild, yes, you can fabricate, whatever. But if you had a knife, how much easier is that, right? You could go out there and you can rub two sticks together and make a fire, but how much easier is it if you had a Bic lighter, right? So it's not about the gear. Definitely being prepared is not about the gear, but it does help out. But you do need to be smart about what you're doing. You do need to make sure that you have a plan. You do need to make sure that you're not going to the store and you're just buying a whole bunch of junk, or hitting Amazon and just buying a whole bunch of junk on Amazon because it looks cool and it looks sexy, and maybe you saw it on a website somewhere. So make sure you do that really well. The second thing that she talks about is that it's impossible to plan for every single disaster. And I'm going to say that is completely true. There is no way that you can plan for every single disaster. Sometimes I'll read a comment on an article or whatever, and someone will say, "Man, well, if you prepare for an EMP, it's like you're preparing for every single thing." Well, maybe not, but there's just no way. There's so many things that happen in life that can come at you from so many different ways that you just need to be flexible. You need to be a person who can think through situations, and she actually talks about that here in a minute. So let me go back to the article here. Sometimes old is really better, and basically what she was talking about is sometimes you can go get gear, you can go purchase gear out there, and it's cheap. There's some stuff that people, again, because prepping is an industry, you can go out there on Amazon and you can find some stuff that looks sexy, that looks good, but it winds up, you bring it home and you use it once or twice and it breaks. And so she's referring to sometimes things, that were made by the U.S. military. If you can buy them at, Army surplus stores, or you can go to garage sales or whatever. Sometimes the things that were made years ago last a lot longer. And I talked about that recently. I have an alarm clock that I bought when my wife and I were first married, and it's 26 years old. It has a cassette tape in it, and so I wouldn't trust putting a cassette in there if I could find a cassette. But it's whatever. It's a Sony, and it's worked for 26 years. And the reason that I like it is because it has a dual alarm. I can set one at 4 and one at 5, whatever, and it'll go off, and it really works, and it does well. And I'm going to keep it until it poops out on me. But sometimes old is better. She also talked about reducing debt, and I will say that is very important. That's going to be important for not only people who are that are in preparedness, but for anybody. And I think that's critical nowadays, that we want to make sure that we are reducing our debt, because the economy is so crazy, and those people that are into to debt to their eyeballs are going to really be hurt when the economy starts to have big issues. And so I just want to encourage you to really start. We're here in 2017 looking at 2018, and that might be one of the things that you really start if you are someone who has a lot of debt. Maybe your family has a lot of debt, and you need to sit down with your spouse and create a budget and start looking at how we can reduce how you can reduce the debt, so you can be in a better position if the poop hits the fan that way. She talked about hygiene and sanitation is more than comfort. And so she, in her studies, in looking at preparedness and doing her research, she realized that, hey, it's nice to have a toilet that you can flush. Everybody would like something like that. But it's more important than just that. It's not just a comfort thing. It's also an issue of being able to keep healthy, stay healthy, and make sure that you don't get sick because people are just out there pooping everywhere. And then also just the hygiene aspect of it, keeping clean and brushing your teeth and those aspects. And so that really needs to play a part in your preparedness, right? All right, so let me go ahead and we'll go back to this article. She talks about chances are you'll have to run, hike, or fight. And in that, she's talking about the aspect of your physical body. At some point you might have to run, hike, or fight, so that your body physically needs to be prepared. If you have to, carry a bug out bag, that's something that recently that I read is like, don't worry about bug out gear, because everybody who decides to bug out, they're going to realize if they're not healthy, if they're not able to carry their bug out bags, they're going to start dropping things left and right. And so there'll be plenty of gear on the ground, right? I mean, I don't think so, but you get the idea behind that, being that people aren't healthy, and we're creating bug out bags and get home bags, and we have all this gear, but we wouldn't be able to really utilize it because we can't carry it, because we'd be huffing and puffing. Or the fact that if you had to defend yourself, could you defend yourself, or are you so heavy that you'd be out of wind, or if you had to run, or whatever. So your body is so important. And guys, I really want to tell you that the way that we eat nowadays, the food that's out there is just crap. And I'm finding that out with my family. We're finding that out even more so. And so it's very, very important to watch what you're eating. Stop eating that fast food. Start eating healthier. And start doing whatever you can to start dropping that weight and becoming healthy. Because I think not only do you feel better, and it helps you in your preparedness and all that, what she talked about, but it's medical issues, right? It will help you with your body, with your health, your overall health. And I think that's very, very important. Especially, I talk about very, very often, is we need to make sure that with medical costs going through the roof at some point, it's going to be beyond the normal person, the common excuse me, is going to be beyond the common everyday person's ability to just go to the doctors like we've been used to. And so we need to take that into consideration. She talks about companies lie. So number 8 was companies lie about their products. She said C, number 1, and I'm going to agree with that one. I'm not going to harp on that one. And just, there you go. Number 9 is disasters won't wait till I'm safe at home. How true is that, man? We plan, and in our minds we have the perfect. When the poop hits the fan, I'm going to be at home. I'm going to be watching the TV, and the TV is going to, whatever, the emergency signal is going to go off, and then I'm going to be ready to go, right? And that's just, or when the poop hits the fan is going to be the evening time when everybody is at home, or is going to be the weekend when we have all this time. That's more than likely that's not the way it's going to be. So you need to think through those kinds of things. You need to have plans with your family. You need to be thinking through all those kinds of things. So, when the poop hits the fan, or if there is ever an emergency, not just, the big one, right? Not just the big, SHTF, but just any emergency that you might have, you need to have some kind of plan set in place so that, your family members know what's going on and what's happening. I think that's important. And I love that Megan talked about that. Number 10 is documenting identification and assets is critical. And again, very, very great advice, good advice here. Let me say good advice here is, you want to make sure that you have copies of your passports, of your driver's license, of your social security cards. You want to make sure that you have copies of, maybe your mortgage and your loans and your bank accounts and all those kinds of things. One of the best pieces of advice that I got early on in preparedness was someone who had been doing it for a long, long time said that they created a binder, a folder of all these important documents for their family, and they made copies of it, and they shipped one off to a family member that they trusted, and they said, "Hey, we need you to keep this for safekeeping." They put one in a bank, in a safety deposit box, so it's there, and then they had one for themselves on top of the originals. And so for whatever reason, if things happen, then there was multiple copies out there so that they could get to them in case of an emergency. And so I think that's great advice. But you always hear about, making sure that you go around your house and taking pictures or video of all the things that you own and serial numbers and all that kind of stuff. And that might seem like a real big pain to do. But in an emergency or in a situation like we had here in Houston, Harvey, that would greatly pay off, because a lot of people flooded that had no thought in their mind that they would flood or that they would lose everything like they did. So that's great, great advice. Another thing that she talks about is cabin fever makes people crazy. Now, I know just recently we had some family members here at the house, and some of my grandkids were here, and they were running around and stuff, and it's raining outside, and so they're not able to go outside and hang out outside. So it was all in here. So how important is that you get a great idea of you need to have things to do, you need to have games to play, those kinds of things for to kind of get your mind off of it. Now I know for myself, I'm fine with a book. Give me a book or my tablet and forget it. I'm good. I'll take a nap. I'll read. I'll take a nap. I'll read. I mean, I'm good with that. But kids aren't. And so if you have kids, you need to have some idea of how you can help spend the time. Whether it's cards, whether it's board games, whether it's coloring books, whether it's toys, whatever it might be. You need to have a plan for that. All right. Number 12 is bugging out isn't the first option or the best. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that because we've talked about that in the past, but how true is that? For me, bugging out is not my first option, and so hopefully you have that in your mind. For me, bugging in is going to be the best option, or if it's so big that my dad has property, we're heading out there. Number 13 was prepping is a bottomless pit, and that is true. If you're not very careful, you can throw a whole lot of money into preparedness, and by the time you know it, it's you've got all this junk and really nothing to account for, right? And so that's why we always talk about you have to have a plan. Don't go into preparedness. Don't go into prepping. Just, trying to make sure that you catch up and your family is prepared, and you don't do it with a plan, because you can start putting so much money into it. And really, you need to think about it really as an investment. If you have auto insurance, if you have homeowners insurance, if you have health insurance, a lot of the times, for instance, you might have auto insurance and you might not ever make a claim on auto insurance. Now, part of that is maybe the state requires you to have the minimum liability. But for the most part, you might not ever make a claim on it, but it is there, and it is an investment in case something bad happens. And same thing with health insurance. Prepping is the same way. So sometimes it might look like a bottomless pit if you're just throwing money at it and you're not really paying attention to what you're doing. You don't have a plan. But on the other side of that, if you do approach it with making a plan, with being thoughtful and being strategic on how you plan and how you prep, then you look at it as an investment, and you're investing in your family, and the fact that at some point things are not going to be as good as they are. And man, we can go in and talk about that. There's so many things out there that are crazy, but if the poop hits the fan, you don't want your family looking at you and saying, okay, so what? And even at that, if they know that you've been prepping, okay, you've been preparing for this, so now what? And you're like, well, I don't know. I have this closet full of stuff here. You want to know what you're doing. You want to have a plan. All right. Continuing on, waiting for number 15 is canned food weighs a lot. Look at lighter options. And she's talking about specifically like bugging out and what you're going to have in your bug out bag, things like that. I've always, or recently, there's been some articles that have come out that have mentioned that if you are bugging out, you don't want to put food in there that you have to cook. The purpose of a bug out is to get you from point A to point B, and you want to get there as fast as possible. And maybe another word for it is 72-hour bag, and you want to get there in 3 days. And so you might be stopping to rest and stopping to sleep. But if you don't have to make a fire, if you don't have to cook and all that kind of stuff, even better, so that you can rest and then get going, right? And even eating on the way. And so if you have items that you can eat that are light, that like canned goods, don't weigh a lot, that you can go ahead and pop in your mouth while you can eat while you're walking or wherever you're going to. That would be good too. But on the other side, maybe you are bugging out and you're planning on bugging out by car. That's another thing. If you're going to empty out your food pantry or your pantry, and you're going to throw it all in boxes and stuff, you got to consider that it's going to be heavy. I still believe in canned goods. And yes, the kind that you can can yourself, but the kind that you buy at the grocery store and putting them in the pantry. And I believe that's still a very, very important option that you need to have and you need to put in place. I would like doing that. I prefer doing that over freeze dried and dehydrated and all that kind of stuff. All right, so next one is waiting for doomsday can be depressing. Yes. Definitely waiting for doomsday can be depressing, and you're waiting for the poop to hit. And for a while there, it just seemed like every so often there was going to be something, like every 6 months there was something big to look forward to, where the poop was going to hit the fan. And so you don't want to live your life counting down the days to the next apocalypse. You want to live your life. You want to be, you want to enjoy life. Maybe you have kids. Maybe you have family. Maybe you have parents and whatever. Maybe there's some things that you enjoy doing, and you want to be able to enjoy life. You got to be smart about it, but you want to be able to enjoy life out there and not just twiddling your thumbs, waiting for the apocalypse to happen so that you could say, hey, I was ready, I was prepared, and you don't want to miss out on all the great things in life. The next thing she says is stalking cash won't save you. Now, I wanted to talk just briefly about this one for sure, because let me read this one. It says, while it's a great idea and critical necessity, to have cash on hand when a disaster happens. Stockpiling cash isn't the only answer. In cases where the power grid is down, cash may quickly become obsolete. Make sure that you are stockpiling physical items and learning skills so that you can use those to barter for items that you may need for your family following an SHTF. Learning skills, I think, is important. I'm always going to say, yeah, you need to do that. You need to invest in that. And stockpiling physical items, I don't have a problem with that. But I think that when people say cash isn't that big of a, you got to be careful with cash, because as soon as people get a whiff of what's going on, that people, cash isn't going to be used anymore. I think if it's the big one, right? I think eventually that will happen, but I think that you will be able to spend most of your money if you have cash. The other thing about that is a lot of people don't trust the banks anymore. So if you are keeping, maybe you have an emergency fund, maybe you have a big safe that you can put money in, or whatever, those kinds of things. Your cash that you keep in your emergency fund could be the same thing. I wish I had a big emergency fund. I don't make that much money, so that would be really, really nice to have. But for some of you out there who do have 6 months worth of expenses, you might want to do 2 or 3 months worth of cash. And if you don't trust the bank, which a lot of people don't, because if there ever was a bank holiday, they wouldn't let you know ahead of time, right? If you look at what happened in Greece and you look at what happened in Argentina, all of a sudden the banks just close down and that's it, and you can't get to your money anymore. And so, there might be people out there like, I don't trust the banks. I don't want to keep my money in there. So I'm going to go ahead and have my emergency fund somewhere, maybe, I don't know. And so I'm going to bury it. I'm going to whatever. I'm going to put it in a safe. I'm going to whatever I'm going to do, right? All those different things. But that might be something you want to do. But I don't necessarily agree that stockpiling cash, or I guess when she's saying stockpiling cash is having big money. I don't know. I do believe that having cash is going to be important, and having some will definitely help if there was ever a situation like that. All right, so moving on this article, she talks a little bit about special needs means special planning, and so I think this is a very, very important one. I talk about it pretty often on the podcast. I talk about that there are a lot of people out there with special needs, or even the elderly, who need special considerations when it comes to preparing. And the thing is that sometimes I think people's ideas are like, well, they're going to die, right? In the poop hits the fan, they're going to die. So what are you doing there? And I think that's just crap. I think that if you have special needs people in your family, if you have elderly in your family, then you are responsible. You need to start making some preparations for them. And so you need to start, whatever it is, start thinking through things. If it's medicine, if it's certain items that they need, whatever it might be, how can you help them? And I really do believe, I keep mentioning it over and over again, I really do believe that it's a big need in the preparedness community. When I look at the people that come to Prepper website and the podcast, and I'm seeing the various, the demographics, whenever I can get demographics, there are older people that are coming. Now, older people want to be prepared. They want to survive. They want to, they can, and the thing is, they can contribute. They have some wisdom. They have skills. They might not be as, as able, excuse me, they might not be as able as you are, but there is a lot that we can learn from those that are older. And so definitely need to keep that into consideration. She talks about, for most survival takes a village or at least a group. I'm going to agree with her on that. I've never been a proponent of going off into the woods by yourself, or I've never been a proponent of being just, you're four and then no more, and your family and that's it. And so I've never been a proponent of that. I've always talked about it. I've been very vocal about that, is that if I am here in my neighborhood for, the poop hits the fan, let's just say EMP hits or whatever, and no one moves, this is it, this is what we have, then I am going to be very, very active in bringing my neighborhood together and solidifying our defenses, solidifying, coming up with plans, figuring out who is who can do what, and doing all that, because there's going to be a lot of things to happen. You don't want to sit around waiting for the government to turn the lights back on, and then in the meantime, everything is falling, going to hell in the handbasket around you. You want to go ahead and be proactive on that. And so I've always said that. I think it's very, very important. The more people that you can bring along, the better. And so, one of the things that we hear about often is people want to prep in a group. And I totally agree with that. I totally believe in that. The thing is that there's got to be, and so she talks, the next thing that she says here, so I'm going to bounce off of both of these at the same time, is number 20 is talking too much really can kill you. And so here's the thing. It's a catch-22. You want to be careful about what you're saying, but at the same time, you want to let it be known out there that you want to find people that are like-minded so that you can form a group with, right? And so this big catch-22 that we have out there. And so it's hard. I know. I've done it out there before here in the Houston area. I've put myself out there and I've met some really great people. I can't say that we're prepping in a group or anything like that, but I have put it out there and, we meet at a coffee shop or we meet at at IHOP or whatever, and had some great conversations, give some advice, and I'd love to hear what they have as well, and all those kinds of things. I even put it out there for a Bible study. We used to have a Bible study in my home and kind of put it out there, and boy, I was really trusting the Lord on that one, that would, that it would come about and happen the way that it was supposed to happen, and it did. But you at some point you have to be a little bit trusting in other people, but be smart, be wise, start off in the right way. And so you need to have this group, but at the same time, you got to be careful with who you're linking up with. And so you just got to be really wise and be smart about it. But if that's something that you want to do, is finding a group, you're going to have to put yourself out there at some point. All right, so moving right along. Number 21 is you need a plan B, C, and D. I think that's pretty much understood what we need to do there. You need to have multiple plans. And like one of the numbers up above said, you might not be home when the poop hits the fan. Your plan A might be completely thrown out the window at the very beginning, and so B, C, and D are going to be very important. She talks about solar power isn't just about lights. Solar power is about other items as well, and to completely agree with her. I think everybody should have a solar battery backup. So maybe like a deep cell battery, marine battery with a solar panel, and you can get an inverter, and then you get the oh my gosh, I'm drawing a blank. But your little, it's not called a regulator, but you know what I'm talking about. So so you don't overcharge. And I can't believe I'm just drawing a blank on that one. But I believe everyone should have one of those. I think they come in very, very handy. During Harvey, I had one that was it was one that I did a review on, but it had a great solar panel on there. I was able to charge up my batteries and different things like that. And but I also have battery backup with the solar panel and all that good stuff. The inverter and all that stuff. So you need to be thinking about that. It's to the point now where it's not that expensive. And if you go buy like a Gold Zero, if you go buy a Yeti, one of those, that's all inclusive, everything's there, and you just throw it up and it's there. Yeah, those are a little bit more expensive, but you can do it really just with a little bit of research. You can do it all probably for about a third of the price to half of the price of one of those big machines that you're talking about, or that the Gold Zeros or the Yetis that I was mentioning. She says here that you really do need all those school subjects that you've heard about before: geography, physics, biology, chemistry, all that good stuff, home economics. Number 24 is practice might not make you perfect, but will make you faster. I really do like that one there, and that is so true. If you have a plan in your mind, right? Let's just say you have it in your mind, and that's all that it's ever been at, and you've never done anything else than just, okay, hey, let me think about this. Okay, I'm good. when it really comes down to it, are you going to be kind of stuck? Sometimes, emergencies hit us and then we're kind of like, oh, we're frozen. But if you have been practicing, if you've been running through it, then you have a little bit of muscle memory that's there, and you're able to move a little bit easier and get to what you need to get to more quickly and faster. And the same thing with your family. If all you ever do is sit down and say, okay, let's go over this plan, but then let's say, and that's it, they might like, okay, this is going on, let me think through my plan. But if you have walked them through it, maybe slowly, hey, this is what we're going to do in the situation. Let's walk through it. Let's go through it, what we're going to actually be doing. You have a little bit of muscle memory there. And so when their mind is going, a million miles to nothing, and they're right in the middle of a situation, hopefully that muscle memory kicks in and helps them. She talked about number 25 is a plan and a budget helps to keep you sane, and I'm going to second that on that one, because if you don't have a plan and if you don't have a budget, then you're going to just find yourself. And let me tell you, I'm coming from experience on that one, right? When I first started in preparedness, I would go to the grocery store, and thank God I had my list. Because if I didn't have my list, I would go, and sometimes I'd just be walking through the store and just thinking about the apocalypse, right? And come on, don't make fun of me. A lot of people go through this, because when your eyes when you finally open your eyes to how fragile this world is, you realize that everything is kind of like hanging by a string. And I remember there was times where I, went to my campus and I was walking down the hall, and just walking down, I'm looking at the teachers and I'm looking at the students and I'm looking at all these people that are here, and life goes on, but in the in just seconds, life can change just like that. And how would these people fare, right? So I would walk into grocery stores, and like I said, thank God I had a list, because I would see something, I'm like, oh, hey, that might be helpful, for the apocalypse, right? Or hey, that might be helpful for this or whatever. And I just walking around kind of like in a daze. And you can spend a lot of money. You can, if you're working out of fear, you can spend a lot of money on a lot of things that making a lot of bad decisions if you don't have a plan. And so you got to have a plan. You got to have a budget. Some of the best things that I've heard in the past where people are like, I set aside $30 a month for preparedness, right? And maybe that might be on top of their food storage or whatever, but maybe preparedness gear. I set aside $30 a month. So with $30, if it's a knife that I want to buy or it's something that I want to buy, I buy it. If I need to save up, if it's something that's more expensive, if it's $300, well, I know that I'm going to be saving for 10 months, right? And then I'll go out and buy it. And so that might be a way that you approach it there, if that's something that you need to do as far as planning with a budget. But I think this was a great article over at Survival Sullivan. There are 10 comments here, and so I always go and take into account the comments that are there. So go give this a read. If you didn't listen to it on the podcast, or if you haven't read it from Prepper website, the link to the article is going to be in the description of this video, and so you can go check that out. And you can also go check out the podcast, episode 216, if you haven't listened to that either. We really appreciate everybody that goes and checks out the podcast. Having a lot of fun doing that. So guys, that's it for the favorite article of the week. I appreciate those of you.